I am Bon, and today I'm going to talk about my take on where BioWare is going as a developer and why I am more optimistic than some other creators who recently have made videos on this same subject. First, if you like Mass Effect or just gaming related things in general, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and commenting down below. To start off, this video isn't like a direct shot at anyone. My original take on the video probably was going to be, but that's unnecessary. Everyone has their own takes, and that's fine. It's more along the lines of I saw a video talking about this and talking about the impact that Dreadwolf could have on the next Mass Effect and on BioWare in general, and I just kind of disagreed fundamentally with a lot of the things the creator said. The creator is one of the biggest creators that makes videos about Mass Effect and BioWare and Dreadwolf. And they have a large following and people who enjoy their content. So they can't be completely wrong. But I still think it'd be good to give a different take on the current situation and where things may go for BioWare. So the first point that the video I saw made was kind of talking about the length of development of Dreadwolf and how that has given just kind of a bad feel to BioWare and its games, especially after Andromeda and Anthem let down, to say the least. I say this as someone newer to BioWare games, newer to Mass Effect. As of the Legendary Edition was my first real interaction with BioWare at all. And I think from my perspective, I don't think the attitude around BioWare is that bad. I think if you're an OG fan of Dragon Age, of even like the Baldur's Gate games, things like that, in the early Mass Effect, I could see where you would see that, especially if you're surrounded by a lot of other like OG fans of the franchises and the studio. But I kind of put myself as someone who maybe is more of the general pool of gamers these days, and I don't think it seems that bad. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the one who's being biased and out of touch. But I think what happens a lot with gaming communities is we get sucked in to these echo chambers, especially creators, because they literally build their own echo chamber with their community. And I think sometimes you find that creators, especially once they get to a certain size and notoriety, just tend to kind of lean towards pessimism. And I think their communities tend to reflect that. And I think they can still have good points, still have good takes, still have good opinions, still have experience and thoughtful takes and such, but sometimes can maybe lose sight of the big picture and to realize that, yeah, those thousands of people who follow you, or those thousands of people in the subreddit or whatever, may be on the more extreme side of an opinion or may not really represent the entirety of a player base. You have a game like Mass Effect where you might have a couple 100,000 people in the subreddit, or you may have a few thousand people watching a video or on Twitter, but you have to realize that you may not necessarily be able to expand their ideas to the millions of fans of the game, the targeted people who buy it. And that, I think, includes kind of having a general take on the studio. I suspect most people don't think about BioWare much at all, because I bet most people don't think about any dev that much at all. But I bet a lot of those people, if you said, hey, do you like Mass Effect? They'd be like, oh, hell yeah, I love Mass Effect. That was my stuff back in the day. And then didn't they just release a new game of that? And aren't they making one? Like, those people aren't like in tune with stuff every single day. And I suspect those people, who are the majority of the purchasing power of a game, aren't really thinking about it that much and probably have a general positive outlook on a studio like BioWare. The Legendary Edition, I think, was a big boost to the reputation. And I know, the portrayal of this and some of the content I've seen is that it was just easy. It was an easy win for them. And it was, to a point. I mean, I'm pretty sure it still took a few years to make. And they had like Mac Walters on it and stuff. Like, they didn't just have like a scrub team on it. And I think that it can't be ignored, though. Like, the current gaming world is bigger than ever. And there's so many people who have never played a BioWare game at all, in the modern gaming community. And even someone like me who's in my 30s, who should have been into the original trilogy of Mass Effect and just wasn't. Something like Legendary Edition brought me in, and people need to realize that these upcoming games, Dreadwolf, the next Mass Effect, won't just be targeting the OGs. They're going to be looking forward, and they're going to be looking today to these players that have never touched the franchises before. There was some mention of Dreadwolf being in development for such a long time. The thing I think that happens a lot when you see creators talk about development is they just kind of match like pitch, concept, pre-production, production, and release and post-release development all into one thing. And so there is a mention of, Dreadwolf has been in development for 8 years. Like, well, maybe. It's probably only been in production for a few. And the impression I'm under is that it was in production, and they basically shut that down and rebooted it from a multiplayer, like live service game to a single player game. And my guess is that, especially if it did hit alpha last year, it's probably only been the game that we are going to play has probably only been in production for 2 or 3 years, and that's why I think it's going to be out really soon, because these games, they can't take 5, 6, 7, 8 years to make from pitch to release, but actual development of games, the production, the actual couple hundred people working on it and finishing it takes 2 or 3 years. And that's even true today, as complicated as games are. And so I really don't think the development time of Dreadwolf is that concerning. At least it isn't to me. There was also talk about how BioWare basically hasn't had a success in over 10 years. And that's just like not true. They did acknowledge that Legendary Edition was successful, and I agree. But Andromeda and Anthem, I believe, financially, especially Andromeda, did okay. Anthem may have been lucky to pay for itself. That's still not a bad thing. I believe the articles I was able to find, obviously there's no hard numbers because game companies don't talk about their bad games, bad in quotes. But I'm fairly certain that Andromeda, I'm sure it made money. And I think Anthem may have even broke even. And while those aren't the glowing successes they wanted Anthem to be like Destiny, and it obviously wasn't. I think throwing around words like success and failure so easily without putting more context around it isn't very good. It's not very informative, and I think it kind of encourages people who don't know much but have strong opinions to be very loud. And we see that a lot in this kind of conversation. The second big point was about how, the length of development of Anthem and Dreadwolf wasn't normal, but I think it is. And I kind of just mentioned this, but I think Dreadwolf, considering its reboots, is probably right on track. And I know that's not what people want to hear. They want the sensational, crazy claim, but I think it's okay. It's taken a long time, but if you consider the actual situation, I think it's probably okay. The third big point I saw was that if Dreadwolf is bad, then Mass Effect may not even happen, as BioWare could be shut down, that BioWare is only around for optics, and that comparing BioWare to other studios at EA, like Respawn and Motive, who have been doing well in the single-player space. Well, I believe Mass Effect is the headline franchise for BioWare, even to this day, and I would be amazed if they would start development on a Mass Effect, that EA would greenlight it, and they wouldn't let that come to fruition before potentially changing up something with BioWare. The people who work in these publishers and stuff aren't stupid, even if they make decisions you don't like. I find it really hard to believe that people at EA don't recognize that Dreadwolf is going to have a rough launch. Like, it's a game that's been in development forever, even though I'm fairly confident about its current production cycle. It's a game that when they did its pre-production, we were in a different era of gaming. And so this game may struggle. But I think if it does struggle and it's not that good and it's a 6 out of 10, I suspect that EA has already kind of written that off the books. I don't think this is a do or die situation. I don't think Dreadwolf is going to be, put BioWare in dire straits. And in fact, I think that it's probably kind of in a mode of, okay, let's get that out there, and then let's put our full brunt into Mass Effect, our headline franchise that won't have all the baggage, of Dreadwolf and Anthem and Andromeda. Let's push this thing fresh, go into a new engine, all of that stuff. I think it'll be okay. I also think that this point kind of ignores that BioWare has like world-class devs and properties and technology. I don't. The examples of Respawn. The one video I saw was talking about how successful Jedi Fallen Order was, which it was a huge success, and it seems like it has pushed EA back into being willing to do single player games. What this video didn't mention that I watched was that they've basically killed their Titanfall single player story game. They canceled a Titanfall Legends game, which was supposed to incorporate their extremely, insanely successful Apex Legends Battle Royale game. So it's not like Respawn it's all flowers and roses over there. And their successful single player game is a licensed game. It's not their property. It's not theirs. And so they can only take so much ownership over that success. The other example was given was Dead Space, the remake, and by Motive. And it's that point was interesting because the creator I watched derided Mass Effect Legendary Edition being such a big deal because it's just a remake, it's a remaster of an old game. And then they praised Dead Space, which is a remake of an old game. It's extremely good. It's one of the best things I've ever played. But I thought that point was kind of funny. And then to push that point further, Motive's next game is going to be an Iron Man game, another licensed game. So it's to use those two examples is like these two studios are doing so well, it could mean the end of BioWare. I highly doubt it because they're so dependent on licensed products now or remakes that if the next Dreadwolf is decent, at least, if the next Mass Effect is good, BioWare is still going to be in good standing because it's still head and shoulders above these other studios, at least in my opinion. The final point of saying that BioWare is still just around for optics is weird. I think I find it. EA has been more than happy to cut studios and give themselves terrible optics. These companies, these publishers, are very money focused, and I would argue that them putting out Dreadwolf, it being bad, and shutting down BioWare. And shutting down an existing Mass Effect project that we know about would look way worse than them just cutting BioWare before they even announced either of those things. And so if they were worried about optics, they would have gotten rid of BioWare after Anthem. Because things were bad, people have understood, like, that's a shame. But if they do it now, after all these years of development and after the beginning of a development of the game everyone really wants, I think that optics take is just not very good, not very informed. It doesn't make sense financially, but I could be wrong. What do I know? Another take here, I saw that the single player success may mean that BioWare won't get more patience. So my take and some others has been that with all of the success EA is having with single player games, that BioWare will probably get more support from EA, like. That's what they're good at, and it seems like they're trying to get good at that again. But there's a take here that's not the case, and it's kind of what I said before. If other studios are successful, then why keep BioWare around? I really think Andromeda was more successful than people think, again, especially financially. One of the videos I watched had a really weird take talking about how terrible Andromeda was and how no one wanted to play it anymore, but then also derided BioWare for not doing DLC to a game that apparently wasn't good enough for people to play. That take was super weird to me. And then there was kind of an acknowledgement about Anthem, but one of the videos said that Anthem was in development for 8 years, but was done in 18 months. And so I think that's where the creators start to get confused about production, pre-production, all that stuff. And now what happened was they did Andromeda, didn't go well. They tried to patch it up, and then they kicked it to the curb. And then they switched a lot of that development to Anthem, and some new people took over leadership. And that obviously it was too little, too late. It didn't work out. And that's the last we've seen of BioWare, other than the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I do believe that the success of the EA, the like the It Takes Two, the Dead Space remake, Jedi Fallen Order, this Wild Hearts seems like it's doing really well besides its performance. I think those games are going to propel Mass Effect and Dragon Age and BioWare, where if all those projects failed, we may have seen BioWare go away if EA really gave up on single player, but they aren't. And then you add on the icing of Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I think BioWare's in a better state than maybe some people want to admit they are. The last point I saw was talking about how Dreadwolf looked too much like God of War's combat, and that a fourth new system of combat in a Dragon Age game could be bad. It could put off fans, and Dreadwolf probably needs to sell pretty well. I'd say 4 to 5 million copies is what it needs to sell to be a success. But some of the takes I saw was kind of like, this combat system looks bad. I would argue that the combat system of the first 3 Dragon Age games is abysmal. For the regular general gamer, where if you want to sell 4 or 5 plus million copies, that's who you're targeting. You're not targeting a niche, you're targeting a majority. And Inquisition's combat is awful. It's one of the reasons I've tried to play that game a few times and I've never finished. So if they are trying to emulate the combat style of the most popular action game ever made, I would say that's a good thing for Dreadwolf, because it's going to pull people like me in who enjoy RPGs, but don't want this old school combat system, want to feel something tactile and grunty and visceral. That's a good thing, I would argue. And the game has to evolve. You can't say that this game needs to sell lots of copies, but also say that it needs to stay in the past. It has to be modern. It has to be updated. They have to pick up trends today while trying to stay true to themselves, to sell a ton of games. So I guess it was weird seeing like commentary against this, like what should be a really good development, portrayed, but also saying that it needs to sell tons of copies when the first point is going to help the second point happen. I don't know. It just seems interesting. I will say that one of the videos I saw was the person said they don't want BioWare to shut down like 15 times, but it kind of seems like they do when you say it that many times. I don't know. That's just me. But personally, I think BioWare is in pretty good shape. I don't think Dreadwolf is do or die. I don't think BioWare is in a dire situation. I think that Dreadwolf should be as good as it can be, but that the next Mass Effect is probably the true test for BioWare next. I just think that everyone in the room understands what Dragon Age is at this point. Hopefully it way overperforms expectations, but if it doesn't, it may just be kind of a darn kind of a thing. And I think people need to stop worrying about old BioWare. Old BioWare isn't coming back. Old BioWare couldn't make a game today. We have to hope that this new BioWare team that has vets on it, that has a bunch of new people who have grown up loving these games, we have to hope that they can set a new standard for BioWare, in my opinion. They need a chance to release Mass Effect. They need a chance to support Dreadwolf. They need a chance to keep doing the things that they're doing, and then we can hope that they don't get turned into a Respawn or a Motive who just makes licensed games and remakes from other properties. I really believe that Dreadwolf may struggle. I'm looking at Dead Island 2 as a similar example of a game that has been in development forever, has been teased forever, but has gone through development issues. But I really believe and I think that they're going to come through, and I think it's worth being optimistic until there's a real grounded reason not to be. But that's just my take. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and commenting down below. That's all I have. So until next time.